Hello, academics, ex-academics, Altax. Welcome to a new episode of the Mind Your Own Revisions podcast. Today, I have a very special guest from across the pond, from all the way from Canada, Kumsal Tekirdag-Kosar. Kumsal is also from Turkey originally, like myself, but I found her on LinkedIn through her advocacy work around mental health, and then we became closer in a way, sharing our life experiences with each other. And she has been so kind to join me today to share her experiences around mental health and in academia as an academic, as an ex-academic or alt-academic at the moment, if I can say that. So thank you for coming on, Kumsal. Welcome to Mind Your Own Revisions.
Thank you, Özgün. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. This is so exciting.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm also very, very excited because I find your work very inspiring and very compassionate, just like it's supposed to be for someone who is working around mental health. So thank you for doing what you do as well. So go ahead.
That's so kind of you to say. Thank you.
Thank you. So I would like to introduce you a bit. Well, I will introduce you shortly, but then I will ask you to introduce yourself, right? So Kumsal has done her PhD on cell biology. So she's an exact scientist in a way, different than myself. I'm a social scientist from education. But now, although she hasn't stopped doing research altogether, she's transitioning to becoming a social worker in Canada. And it's a very exciting route for her, I know, and I can imagine also, because she's studying from scratch again to do this work. And for many of us academics, this kind of big career change is a bit scary for some people. Or I can imagine that some people say, oh my God, what a courage you have, or you're starting over and everything. So I would like to talk a bit about that. So would you like to introduce yourself a bit to the listeners?
Sure. Yeah. As you mentioned, I have a PhD in cell biology. I graduated in 2015, and then I moved to US for a postdoctoral research fellowship in New York. And during my work there as a postdoctoral fellow, I kind of had a good journey, I would say, first of all, as a researcher, and I guess learning more about what I can do with a PhD. Because I was also thinking that once you have your PhD, you're kind of set on doing a postdoc and finding an, position in a university, either in Turkey, back in my home country, or in United States. So that was kind of my understanding or goal at the time as well. But as I went through my training, I realized that with a PhD, you can do so many things, so many skills that we PhD holders possess, and you can kind of use them anywhere that you want. So that was kind of an epiphany for me. I never thought of like that, outside the box. And yeah, my slight transition out of academia didn't come at once. And you mentioned that the idea of changing being very scary. And I have to assure our listeners that it is still scary for me. Even though I'm in the midst of it, I feel like this has been a long process of trying to figure out what I really want to do, not just with my PhD, but in my life. Like how to find meaning and how to work with community and give back to them. So that's kind of where I always wanted to see myself. And being a scientist working in a lab, I was really not working with people, individuals directly. So that was kind of my yearning, I would call. Like always, I try to find ways to include myself in committees or find myself initiatives around wellness, mental health. So I started doing that a lot during my postdoc. And that kind of gave me this flavor of what it would look like to work with people, work with individuals directly. So once I got the taste of it, I felt like I was really missing a lot personally, even though I love science and as you said, I'm a hardcore, pure STEM scientist working in a lab with cells, with animals, and doing experimental work. So I kind of missed that human connection, not just working around people, but with people, for people. So once I realized that, it was hard to unknow that, you know. So I had to kind of make a decision to see whether I'll really shift my career towards working with people. And I started looking for ways on how to do that. So yeah, that's kind of how it all started, the whole shift, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. But among all of the things that you could choose to do, you decided to become a social worker. And I would like to explain that a bit for some people who are listening. Well, before, when we talked first time off the record, yeah, when Kumsal said, okay, I'm studying to become a social worker, I thought, like, just like people in Belgium, social worker is someone who's working in an NGO, who's working, to help people to organize things for people with the less chances. And yeah, I have personally, people like myself. But then Kumsal clarified it, saying that she's going to become a therapist or yeah, someone who can do therapy among other things. And that's very interesting for me as someone living in continental Europe, where that role is reserved for people with a master's degree, at least in clinical psychology. So could you also give us a bit of a definition of what you are going to do, and what does a so-called social worker do in Canada?
Sure. Yes. I realize, like, I understand that it's kind of different how social work, I guess, role is in different countries. And I even remember, now that you're saying how the role in Europe, I remembered in Turkey, I never heard of this role because, again, in Turkey, similar to Europe, doing psychotherapy is a designated kind of task for psychologists or psychiatrists. And so, to my experience, and which was really liberating to learn, social work is a profession like in North America, I would say. In United States and Canada, the experience was, I think it's quite similar how they function. They are, I'm not sure the exact statistic, but I would say like half of all mental health practitioners are social workers. Like, I might be wrong with the statistic then, but overwhelming majority of mental health practitioners are social workers, which means social workers can work in settings, as you mentioned, like NGOs or hospitals, or in places like community centers where they can help marginalized or vulnerable populations to access to resources, let's say, or advocate on their behalf, and also conduct counseling with them, like not necessarily therapy, but like short-term counseling. So social workers like work in a variety of tasks in different settings. And in Canada specifically, it's a regulated profession, which means if you want to call yourself a social worker, you need either a bachelor's level degree or a master's of social work, which is the program that I'm in. And once you complete this program, you graduate with generic skills, which means you have some interview skills, some advocacy skills, some research skills, and then you continue your training to become a psychotherapist. So that's a track that you can take, which is called kind of working in the micro level. Like social workers can work in 3 levels, macro, meso, or micro. And I'm targeting to work with micro level while learning some, I would say, fundamental skills for different therapeutic modalities like CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, or EFT, emotionally focused therapy. Like that's a track that you can take. And because I would like to work directly with people, I plan to go to that place, that track. But it's all, it changes and evolves as you go. So I'm not also against on working macro level, which kind of consists of working more on the policy level. Like you work in communities or organizations for changes, advocate for clients. So that's more of a bigger level. And I don't think the levels are separatable. But as you said, my goal is to become a psychotherapist with further training.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think that it's a great chance to be able to become a therapist from another track, educational track, let's say. It's something very interesting that you guys have in North America. Yeah. And having talked about you wanting to work on this micro level with people, hopefully as a psychotherapist, among other things, I would like to ask why? Where did this desire come from? So could you tell us a bit about like your reasons why embarking on this journey, and also your own experience with mental health and receiving this kind of help as well?
That's a great question. And I see two parts of it, like why social worker and my own mental health journey. So the desire to work with people, I guess it comes to me since I was a child. Like I always wanted to pursue this track. And as you said, in Europe, in Turkey, it's quite siloed, I would say, like it's boxed. Like if you're in one track, it's really hard for you to switch. And if you're in let's say math and science track at high school, the system doesn't allow you to become a psychologist. It's designed that way. So I always desired to work with people, and I always had this passion for psychology, but for some reason, I was not able to pursue it in the like graduate level, undergrad or graduate. I tried, but it's just the way system design is not allowing that kind of switch. Once you're in one track, you have to follow it. And that's kind of one of the issues, I guess, in that kind of system, like not allowing people to reroute, reconsider what they want in life, because we all decide these kind of big career decisions when we are so young. And when we try to change, when it's so difficult, I just feel like it's not fair.
Exactly.
So it's great that in North America, there is a way at least. And I would say I never left that hope in me to find a way to change my track, even though I seemingly doubled down on my PhD, my postdoc. I always had it at the back of my mind, but I felt like this is impossible. Like in Turkey, it was really not possible. And at the time, I had no idea how things work in the United States or Canada. But in the United States, where I was really, going deep in my academic career, I came across a social worker in my own mental health journey. Like I was a new immigrant. dealing with a lot of family issues, isolation, adaptation. And as a native Turkish woman and in United States, I had a lot of struggles in my first year, and those never ended actually. But yeah, I thought maybe it's a good thing to ask for support, and I've been always very open to ask for support, for counseling, for therapy throughout my, I guess, life. So in United States, looking for a mental health practitioner was not different for me. It's what I always did in Turkey, and that's what I did there. And to my luck, I came across a social worker. So I really didn't know that they could do psychotherapy, but that's how I kind of figured out that I can go for therapy to a social worker, and our work together, which was an extensive, very long time therapy work, was, I would say, I guess, transformative. Like I really had the chance to really deconstruct some of my beliefs, some of the ideas that I hold for myself, and really question like where these ideas are coming from. Let's say I was working in academia as a postdoc, but I started asking myself, do I really want to work here? Is this really what I would like to do with my life? Those kind of questions were really as a result of my work with her, kind of indirect result. And that kind of led me to feel like I have a choice. I can choose to become something else. And I knew this was not going to be easy, but having that choice was, I guess, what I needed, because I didn't feel like I had it in Turkey. So kind of having that choice in the United States, at least it was there if I wanted to do. Like I was able to go back to graduate school as a MSW student, like I'm doing now. And I could become a psychotherapist. Like knowing that that choice exists was super liberating, I would say. And frankly, I was not able to pursue that in the United States because I was on a visa, and my visa was tied to my employment. So I was not very flexible or free to do what I want. So kind of try to find different ways. Like as I'm talking to you now, I'm realizing I never gave up that hope that I would find a way. And that's kind of my personal motto, like finding a way. Like no matter how impossible something seems, we can find a way. Like we cannot know it ahead of time. It just unravels in front of us if we keep on course. That's, I guess, what I did. It was not possible in the United States, but then we decided to immigrate to Canada. And now that I'm here without a visa as a permanent resident, I'm able to do that switch, like go back to school, get my MSW and everything. So now looking back, everything comes together nicely.
Yeah. Wow. And just like you said, I think a lot of us academics can relate to what you said, like finding a way, because that's what we are trained to do, right? As scientists, as academics, as anyone who does a PhD, I am sure you come to a point where, you're so stuck that it's just, okay, it's gonna crumble down anytime now and nothing is moving forward. And I'm still persevering in the belief that, okay, I will find a way. And that's maybe one of the transferable skills that you were talking about. Like as a scientist, I can do a lot outside of academia because I have like so many things that I can take with me there, right?
Yes.
But the other thing is that, yeah, I'm very happy that you mentioned this. Actually, I've been meaning to do an episode about this. Maybe it will come in the coming months. The experience of being a migrant, being an immigrant, and the isolation that you mentioned, and the adaptation period, and all of the like mental health struggles that brings with it. because I think many academics can relate to that. In academia today, it's very, very difficult to get to anywhere without having to move at some point in your life to another country, work somewhere else. So many of us experience this, and I think it can be a very heavy experience for many people. It was for me, and that triggered a long bout of depression also for myself, like first few years of the PhD. Again, therapy also for myself, so I can totally relate to that. So thank you for bringing that up. That's a very important thing to acknowledge, to recognize.
I agree. And also it's, I think, important for people to speak up about mental health, their own journey, no matter how hard it is, to address the stigma. Because still today, even though we are talking now, we are very open about our long-term therapy journeys, the mental health stigma is there. It's we are slowly tackling it, slowly addressing it, but it's still there, and it's in so many levels. Personal level, when we go to a healthcare professional, let's say, how they treat us if we bring out, mental health issues, if we bring our mental health issues to service in the workplace, like those kind of instances, we can realize that there is still a stigma around it, and people are perceived weak, incompetent for some reason if they bring up their issues, which needs to be addressed, I think. And that's one of the reasons why I try to be very vocal about mental health on social media, because I truly believe it's a strength that we take care of our mental health. We speak about it, and it's as important as our physical health, and we need to keep protecting it, preserving it, not like shovel it out to somewhere that it doesn't exist. That's not true. It's not just physical health, it's a holistic way of seeing things. So yeah.
You're right. I mean, with many people, well, I don't want to generalize this to academics, but let's say to high achieving people, so one of the things I observe is that, you have to, like, in Dutch, they say, bite your tongue. No, bite your teeth, just go through it. Like, nothing is easy in life. The path you're on is not supposed to be easy. You just go through, you just do it. And as you said, the mental health aspects of things is just okay. That's for CCs.
That's exactly true. Like in this, I think I felt in working in during my PhD in Turkey a lot, like pushing through, like never taking a break, just pushing through every other adversity that you face, and as if it's strength to do that, which is completely wrong. But that's kind of the way culture is structured. And in the US, I remember how fast and I would call it hustling. Like you are always in the hustle. You're always rising to the occasion, they call. You keep pushing. You never take a break. And frankly, if you do take a break, someone else will take your position. Like you become redundant, which is kind of the system penalizing you taking a break, prioritizing self-care. And I feel like in academia, this is so pervasive. It's such a common way of functioning, and seeing people less committed, let's say, if they want to take a break, if they would prioritize their mental health. It's slowly shifting, like more and more people are speaking up. And I feel like it has to come from perhaps top to bottom. Like if people in a higher authority, power position, if they speak up, having those challenges, it makes such a difference. It just trickles down. But if you are in a position where you're a student, where you're, I don't know, where you're a marginalized member of the community, like an immigrant, and speaking up saying, I have mental health issues, it's just very hard for you to address that because of the level of power you hold in the system. So we really need people recognizing that this is a systemic issue, that it needs to change. We need to prioritize mental health as we do physical health.
Indeed. And that brings another question to my mind, just spontaneously. But I don't know if you have an answer to this, but what have you observed so far regarding mental health among academics? Like in your academic career so far, were you able to like pinpoint certain patterns, certain ways people talk about mental health? Well, we touched upon this, but can you give us more concrete examples, like the actual, from actual lives of actual people?
I would, I guess, start with sharing my observation. And this is, again, a disclaimer. This is my personal observation. It's completely subjective, how I experience things in Turkey and US academia. And I felt like mental health is not a topic that people discuss. Like discussing your mental well-being, how you're doing, how you're feeling, going into the depths of it is just not something that is discussed. That's one of the things I think makes this a very systemic issue. Like if we don't acknowledge the presence of something, we can't address it. Like the importance of mental health, I feel like there were systemic organizational issues where I was working in after 2018. Like there was a student mental health center getting established in my postdoctoral like position for the entire institution, because I realized at that moment a lot of students were bringing mental health concerns, and the students were medical students and PhD students. Like they were under an immense stress, and there were also some suicide cases due to the stress. So the system responded to this, I would say, acute crisis of mental health. And it's not just this institution. I think it was across the nation. Like everyone is realizing more and more that mental health is not something we can avoid. Everyone has it. It's not same as mental illness. So there was a response from the institution establishing this center. So I felt like people were getting a bit more comfortable discussing what it is, why it's important, and what if we don't address it? Like what happens if we don't take care of our mental health? I mean, the extreme cases is like extreme distress, and even, God forbid, the suicide, the case, which we obviously do not want it to happen. So in order to prevent those cases from happening, we need to really come back and see, okay, how we can support people, academics, and academics, I mean students, researchers, faculty, like everyone in the institution, how we can support them. So I felt like there was a bit more open conversation starting, but it's so recent, like 2-3 years ago when I was there. And I was very happy to get involved with that, because I can say it's too late to start that conversation. It should have been already there.
Yeah.
But I guess it's late than never, and yeah, I feel like more people are thinking about it, but like talking about it and sharing it openly, we still have a long way to go.
And just like you mentioned, this was if I understand correctly, this was an initiative especially for students, right? So not for academics, not for professors, not for
faculty. The postdocs were part of it because we are in a kind of very tricky place. I mean, it was that institution, and I have a feeling that it's also the way the postdocs are treated. Sometimes we are called students, which is completely wrong. We're not students, but we are not also faculty. So we were in this middle position where no one was able to place us correctly. So we were able to use that center, but faculty had to find their own resources, and they were not really part of this initiative. That also shows a lot, right?
Yeah, well, the limbo that you were in as a postdoc sounds like the limbo we are in as PhD candidates in Belgium. I could say, like, some people like, oh, it's a PhD student, but then no, these people are researchers that are actually conducting research, are doing work, and most of the time getting paid for it as well, but in the form of scholarship and not salary and all of that. But having said that, in my university, I didn't have access to these services as a PhD candidate. These services were only available to bachelor's and master's students, so I had to find my own way as well. Though in 2 moments of crisis, I can say that they took me for like one like urgent consultation kind of thing before directing me to someone else. But indeed, I that's a bit of a
the issues with access and how system kind of categorizes people who can use a service, who is eligible, who is not, and how that marginalizes certain people. If they're in a certain position, they are not really eligible, but there's no place that can address their needs. So yeah. I'm sorry you had that experience.
Well, you live and learn. No, there could also be another way of looking at this, saying that yeah, as a like a staff member, to keep my privacy, and maybe some people wouldn't be comfortable going to the services that are provided by the university. But in my opinion, knowing that such a place exists, that already puts your mind at ease. Because otherwise, especially now, and after such a long time, after in this corona pandemic period, finding a mental health care provider is such a huge issue in Belgium. The waiting lists are at least several months long. If you need help right now, the earliest you can get it is like 4 months or something for some people, including like life-threatening mental health issues, including like eating disorders and all of that, right? Even these people who needs to become inpatient have to wait, due to all these waiting lists and all. But anyway, that's
I hear you saying, and in Canada as well, that's been part of my experience, and it's so frustrating to see all like when you inquire, people saying, oh, my practice is full, I have a wait list, and then the the community services are all full or booked and they're wait lists, and you have to pay out of pocket. It shows us what system values of mental health actually.
Exactly. Also paying out of pocket for mental health care, right? To go to a psychologist, a social worker. In Belgium, it is also like that. Oh, that's a luxury, as if it's a luxury, as if it is this, it's an optional thing. Going to a doctor for a physical thing is not optional, but
exactly. And I think it shows, like, I'm grateful that you mentioned this, your experience from Belgium, because that's been my experience in Canada as well. Because Canada, as you might know, has a universal healthcare system, which means you don't need to pay for your family doctor visits, like most of the procedures done. You pay for the prescriptions and some other things, but you have a universal healthcare. But I realized that it doesn't include mental health care, which was to my shock. I remember being very shocked seeing that this is not covered, and you need to have a private insurance to supplement and pay and get reimbursed. And it's a cumbersome process to to do that. You pay for a practitioner, then you get reimbursed for it, and you still have to pay a portion depending on how good your insurance is. So I feel like it's, as you just said, it's a luxury, and some people who are privileged enough to have a private insurance to afford it, and it shouldn't be this way. Mental health should be free for all, and this is one of the really, I guess, and I see my fist coming up. This is the points that I'm very strong about, and that's why I love the role of being a social worker, a future social worker, because I can advocate for these kind of changes. And maybe I wouldn't see in my lifetime, but I will be part of pushing that change and always saying, hey, this needs to be free for all. This is not the way things should be. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very noble thing to do. Also, just like yeah, everyone else who did that for us, for our generation before us, to pave the way for the all of the things that we can enjoy right now as human beings, and yeah,
Definitely.
as women as well. That's another thing.
So
Yeah.
true.
So we were also, let's go back to your career transition, and I want to ask you, like, how does it feel to study again, like once more, for yet another degree after a long time, and how are your feelings around that?
Wow, that's an amazing question. That's actually a reflection that I'm going through daily, because it's, as you said, it's a big change, and I kind of realize myself sometimes feeling into that rabbit hole, thinking, why am I doing this? I have my final degree. What's the purpose of my like daily activities? Like, I go through that existential crisis sometimes, and I come out of it saying, I'm really doing this, I guess, for myself. Like, I felt like I did PhD for several reasons, including my love of science, like curiosity. I wanted to learn, I wanted to advance myself. And also the fact that I had a funding, like it gave me like a scholarship, like a salary, a place to live, and a community to belong. So it was like the whole package. But it really didn't serve me in the way that I would see myself in my life. Like, it didn't give me meaning, I guess. So when I go through that existential crisis saying, why am I going back to school? Why I'm studying again? And it's hard to be a student again in your mid-30s, like with also a toddler. Like, it's complicated mix. But I remind myself daily that I'm doing this for myself. And I feel like having that kind of understanding why we are doing what we are doing, and really doing it for ourselves, is so crucial. And it doesn't make it easy. I mean, I wouldn't say this is easy. I'm, acing through everything without an effort. On the contrary, it takes a lot of planning, because I have a family life to balance, and I'm a newcomer in Canada with little social support here. So it's a challenge, daily challenge sometimes, to make things happen, like go to my courses, even though they're online right now, like find ways to learn new things, because I'm a beginner in this field, and engage with people, create a network. And it's overwhelming at times, I wouldn't lie. But I remind myself that I'm doing this for myself. And honestly, I love being a student in social work. The concepts that I'm learning, they're from life. Like, um, they are sometimes daily topics, like political topics or something else, like policy related things that I can make sense of, I can think about, and I can contribute to my daily life thinking about them. And also learning about all those therapeutic modalities, like parenting strategies. It's like part of life. And that was kind of my issue with science, I guess. Like, I loved working in the lab, doing like cell work, doing experiments with animals, but it was like a long way to translate that knowledge to people. Like I was working on a disease and a neurodegenerative disease, but in such a distant level that I never came in contact with a Parkinson's patient. And that's where I want to be. Like I would like to work with people who are experiencing that disease. I mean, I know the molecular things going on in their brain, which is great, but I want to be helpful to them when they're alive, not after they're deceased and, analyzing their tissues. It's just not the way I see my life going forward. So when I doubt myself or have these, problems daily, I remind myself that I'm doing this for me and I will find a way to pursue.
Yeah, I can so relate to what you're saying right now. I had like a same idea transitioning out of academia, at least academic work itself. Yeah. And now comes a question that I ask almost everyone who comes onto the podcast. It's about burnout. And I am myself a burnout coach, a burnout survivor, and helping people overcome burnout and prevent burnout has become my mission in life after going through that experience as an academic. So a bit similarity there with you. And I've been wondering, like, have you had this experience of burnout, or you can call it burnout? Of course, there's a lot of let's say confusion around the word burnout, the diagnosis of burnout, especially in North America, I guess, because in Europe it's more like clearly defined, in my opinion. Here in Belgium, when you say burnout, half of the people will understand you probably. Okay, maybe that's an optimistic estimate, but anyway, people will know. At least medical doctors know that it's a condition. It is recognized as a thing in health. So would you like to share your experiences around that?
Sure. Well, I feel like I experienced burnout during my PhD, but I never called it out as a burnout. I felt that was part of the process. And I guess I was under the impression that that was how it's supposed to be. And how I experienced was like constant working, like never even taking a vacation or break, and not having anything in your life but just your PhD. And after a certain point, you become so consumed with those experiments, those results, and you become like detached from real life, right? The real things going on, because that's your priority. You are so focused on what you're doing. And even though if you're exhausted, and I remember I was, not being able to say, hey, I need a break. And I remember I had a condition in my knee. I had like a little tear when I was during the latest stages. And that was my excuse to take a break, because I was not able to articulate saying, hey, I'm feeling so depressed. And I remember going to therapy, taking antidepressant medication, but those were not reasons to say, hey, I need to slow down. This is really not good for my mental health, because I was not, first of all, that strong. And it's in a different culture, we need to look from that cultural lens. Like in Turkish culture, saying that openly, it has a lot of stigma around it.
Yeah,
like
you're
even
just lazy then. You're just lazy.
you're lazy, you're making excuses, you're not tough enough, you're not made for this. And you can hear these messages from everywhere, from your mentor to your family to your peers, and you will be further isolated. So you just don't speak up in that way. But I was kind of brave, I would say, to go to therapy like regularly. I was taking antidepressant medication, but I was not able to slow down. So my physical health, and I really want to stress is that the mental health and physical health connection, it's so intricate. And it's, I would put it this way, I guess, if we don't take care of our mental health for a certain amount of time and the burnout and exhaustion becomes chronic, our body slows us down and it says, hey, you need to stop. So we start having these symptoms, like we have a sprain on our ankle, we bruise our knee, we feel a headache, back pain, you name it. So our physical health takes it over, I think, and then you just have to stop, because at some point for me, I remember it was impossible to continue. And I remember being completely wasted. Like I was out for a month, I guess, and I was not able to even relax. I was consumed of being behind, not being able to work. And I was not able to just, I guess, understand and experience. Now I'm looking back. I guess that was burnout because there's no easy explanation for that. So I have those experiences a lot during my career. I think during the pandemic also, I felt like I was really exhausted and I couldn't continue anymore. Like I couldn't know how to, further my research, but it was hard for me to bring this up with my, workplace again. It's just tough to have that conversations, and it also depends on the culture of the workplace. And I had supervisors who were like supportive in many ways, but again, the culture of that, I guess, work or institution, it needs to be addressed in burnout, because individual aids, like, okay, take a couple days or do this, do that, they're like band-aids. Like they help, but you come back like feeling less overwhelmed, and then you get again at the same, place quickly.
Exactly.
So I guess we need something else to address it, but it's a long journey. Yeah.
Exactly. Just like you said, you remove yourself from the situation, but if the circumstances don't change or you don't come in with a set of boundaries where you go like, that is a no, that is a no, that is a no, then
I'm
if
so
those things
glad
are not
you mentioned that.
respected at the end, then you end up in the same place. That's the thing.
That's so true. That's what was passing through my mind. I was thinking of, what if we change the culture? What if the place changes and we internalize those behaviors? Like we have a way of functioning. It's the mindset we carry like over and over, year after year. We are there. So it's also that, like changing your place and then I guess changing your mindset. That's even harder. Like that I'm still struggling with, and I'm trying to put, like as you said, boundaries, saying, okay, I'm not doing this at this time, this is my family time. But that kind of, I guess, self-understanding comes after a long self journey, and I credit my therapy for that. Like if I was not working on myself and trying to understand it, I wouldn't be strong enough to say, hey, I'm not going to do this, because then you feel like, okay, maybe I'm not enough. Those feelings of imposter syndrome creep in. To just push them aside, you need to feel comfortable with saying no. And that's the internal work. So changing the culture, place, definitely, but also doing the internal work to strengthen ourselves to say, hey, this is my limit. I just can't take it.
Yeah, because it's also true, as you said, that we as individuals, we make up those cultures as well, and vice versa. Work culture makes us, and we make up part of the work culture. So it's in our hands to slow that down, at least, even if we cannot change the whole thing at once. Can all bring in this awareness from different angles and then say, okay, openly talk about it and say, this is not okay. And if in a workplace or in an industry or in a community like academia, if many people are having the same quote unquote individual experience of burnout, that is not an individual experience, that is a societal issue.
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
so
that's true.
yeah, indeed. As a person who works with individuals around burnout, I face with that question a lot, but people say it's because of my workplace that I'm here, that I'm in burnout. Well, yes, and there are also things that you can do. First of all, bringing
Right.
yourself back up from that place, and then with that empowerment, knowing that you have choice, you decide to go back to that same workplace or not, you decide to have like which boundaries to put or not, you engage with that dysfunctional, it may be, the work culture in a way that you can at least preserve your health as much as possible before taking on the whole system and fixing everything, right?
Yeah, right. That's true. It's just, it's hard when you're living in it. And I just want to assure, I mean, myself first, and also other people who are experiencing, and I think we should call it what it is first. It's a systemic issue. And when we call it that, it just relieves people from that sort of blame, saying, okay, this is on me to change it. Like, takes a little bit of blame, and people, everyone needs to feel that this is not 100% our control. It's, as you said, like both things interacting, and we need to take a little responsibility, but also don't forget that this is systemic. So I think that kind of balance is important to empower people, because when facing systemic issues like this, like organizational burnout, or bigger issues like racism, ageism, that kind of problems, societal issues, if we don't acknowledge their presence and we just tell people, hey, you just need to do some self-care, you need to learn conflict management skills or communication skills, or you need to meditate, or you need to do this, it just puts a little too much responsibility, in my opinion. We need to first acknowledge that this is a problem and they are not to blame, but they have the power to change it, to like either take themselves out or stay in it, as you say, but like in a different shape or form. And that is a long journey. It needs company. And I'm glad you're helping people who are experiencing it to change their mindset, empower them so that they can find new ways to be in the same position if they want, or just leave it. Their choice.
That too. Yeah, thank you. Well, I can also say the same things about you, having gone through the same thing. Well, I really hope that you will be in the future able to work with academics who need this kind of help and support, just like you needed in the past.
Yeah.
And before we finish, if if possible, I would like to go back to the migration piece once again, because in our first conversation that was off the record, we talked a lot about it. We exchanged our experiences and all, and now that we are both here, we are migrants from Turkey in two different parts of the world. Maybe we can talk a bit more about our experiences and how we overcame those negative feelings that migration brought on us, or not. Maybe it's not overcoming, right? For myself, I can say that I didn't overcome anything. I just learned to live with it. I was able to transform some of it. But yeah, because I'm asking this because you mentioned in our previous talk, this migrant experience as overwhelming, life-altering, and traumatic at the same time. So if you don't mind sharing a bit more about that from the angle of the United States and Canada, and maybe I can chip in with my experience from Belgium. Maybe we can help others in a similar situation to come to terms with the let's say how widely experienced these feelings are as migrants in academic world.
Wow, totally. Well, that's a very noble goal, and I feel like I am like more than honored to be in a position where I can I guess be an immigrant advocate or someone who has been through significant time living outside home country and having this experience, and to validate the feelings of current immigrants, migrants, or people who are trying to, do that step. It's a very tough thing to do. As you said, I name it as life altering. And when I was about to do this change, I knew it would entail a lot of things to shift, but I guess I wouldn't have known that this would be an experience that I would deconstruct my whole identity. Like that's how I experienced it, like really deconstructing who I am, what I was told. And I see this like as a metaphor, I guess, like taking a plant from the soil that they grow, like planting it somewhere else. That plant needs to really adapt. Like you really need to deconstruct to your core and see how you can make it in this new environment, new culture. And that's a very tough experience to do. Like, but it doesn't matter when you do it in your 20s, 30s, but it's just it changes the way you see the world. You don't have that kind of like culture around you, which is like the air you breathe. You don't even realize because you see everything through that culture. And when you change, everything is different and people function in a different way. And the subtle little things, like even mundane daily things, they're different. So you need to learn a lot of invisible things alongside with the technical, like logistic things, like finding where to go to grocery shopping or just finding a doctor, finding a tailor. Like the fact that you don't have anyone, like it also depends on the experience. Like me, I didn't have any relatives in US. It was me and my husband. So we had to build that, and not knowing anyone, like very in a close way, not knowing where to go shopping or like going to a doctor, like even little things. I found it so overwhelming. And I realized I didn't think much about it in the US. I just worked. I was so immersed in my work, and I felt like I didn't really have the time. But in Canada, now that I'm in a different position, and this is a different time. We moved during the pandemic, so things are really different. Things are slow. Things are closed. So I really felt that kind of change even more strongly. Like not having a network, not having people. It's just tough for a new immigrant. It's more than, I would say, speaking the language of the country. It's just that unspoken things that kind of hold you back, and you have to face them over and over again, understanding, okay, this is the way people do things around here, and I should better learn it to look and sound like them. Not that you would become a clone, but to feel comfortable in that culture and to be also accepted, like to feel the belonging. And as an immigrant, that's, I guess, one of the things that I searched for so long. Like, where do I belong in this new culture? Do I even belong? Like, where? How? As whom? And when you ask those questions, sometimes the answer can be like hard to swallow. And then now I'm asking them again in Canada, like, where do I belong? Where do I see myself as a future Canadian now that I'm permanently in this country? How do I want to be part of this society? How to give back? Like, and I see myself, I guess this is a circle back to where we started, like helping new immigrants to integrate, settle in this country in a less traumatic way, I would say. Like find a network, find the supports and where can I be to facilitate those transitions. Like I see myself hopefully being in these positions that I can assist. Because when I came like a year ago, I used a lot of those services and they were really helpful. Like when you don't know anything, those kind of services really matter. And Canada does a good job to have those supports for newcomers, because this is a predominantly immigrant country, very multicultural, very diverse society. So Canada values immigrants and supports them. So I guess I would like to be in that position, supporting new immigrants and just easing that transition a little, you know.
That's amazing to hear. Yeah, it's also a bit, it also has to do with Canada being a country that welcomes and seeks immigrants and yeah, invites them on purpose, unlike Belgium, where things are very different in continental Europe. As a Turkish person, I can say that, you know, the when people ask me, Aya, where are you from? I say, I'm from Turkey. Oh, first of all, they go like, oh, and then the second question is your family here? Because the mainstream image of Turkish migrant in Belgium is someone who came in the 70s to work in the mines or in the textile sector, very lowly educated, from lower socioeconomic status, and then these unwelcome guest workers who just stayed here and then had their like children, and then second generation and third generation and all of that. So that's the second question. Is your family here? Oh no, my family is not here. Okay. So that's another thing that goes, this there is this label of Turkish in Belgium, in Germany, I can imagine, and the Netherlands and in France maybe. So that's quite a different migration experience, I can tell. And another one is language. Like you said, you guys, okay, it's not that big of a deal maybe, but everybody speaks English right here, the local languages. And in Belgium, we have two, well, and also three, but the German is not that, German-speaking community is not that big. So, but the migration experience, wherever you go, from what I understand from this conversation, it's never easy. Even if you go to a country where migrants are very wanted and welcomed, and highly educated migrants, especially like us, right?
It's just, I guess, the experience itself, like taking yourself from a place where you were someone, and maybe that someone, like usually people immigrate for different reasons. If it's not a refugee case, people immigrate like predominantly because of economic reasons, right? To have better options for themselves or their children. That's why they also came. So it's kind of having this idea like, okay, we are going to have better options. But when you like move, like what happens to many Canadian immigrants is that they realize that there are systemic barriers, like you were mentioning, like knowing the other languages in Belgium, let's say, that's a systemic barrier that immigrants have to face and overcome. And here it's like the Canadian experience. Like if you do not have that experience under your belt, no matter how long you worked as a certain profession in your own country, you can't work. And that kind of barrier really demoralizes people. It's just a huge stress. And I know a lot of doctors, nurses who cannot practice in Canada, no matter how skilled they are. So they're underemployed. Like they work as PSWs, peer support workers, or just administrative roles. And that kind of shift, no matter how supportive culture seems, and I would use the word quote unquote seem here, it's very challenging to tackle those barriers and breaking the stereotypes. Like you mentioned, this is what a Turkish person is supposed to look like or behave like or come from. Like, what if not? What if you're outlier, like you're not the typical Turkish person, and like having that kind of discrimination, I would say that's tough. We should call it what it is. It's discrimination against newcomers, and we should really eliminate those practices. Like Canadian experience barrier, for example, in Canada, it is like started it's been a decade since they started to address it systemically, and lately it's also again like under discussion because there's a huge labor shortage due to pandemic, and lots of internationally trained professionals are out of jobs or they're doing something else. So now Canada is really reconsidering to waive, like completely take it out so that the international professionals can work in their trained fields. So like it takes a long time to see through these changes, but I feel like it's on the way, like breaking those barriers one at a time, and it happens very slowly. It's discouraging that it's so slow, but we need to be on it. We need to talk about it and address it in any way that we can.
Yeah, so true. Thank you for saying that. And
I get too passionate about immigration issues. Yeah, I can talk all day.
yeah, right. Maybe we should have another episode about that. But thank you. Thank you so much for your time, Kumsal. It was so nice to talk with you. I am so impressed by your dedication to helping people around their mental health and your openness about sharing your own experiences. So thank you so much for that.
You're welcome. Yeah, this has been my pleasure. Yeah.
Thank you. And last but not least, if people want to contact you, how can they do that? How can they find you? Do you have a website or a blog or yeah, anything?
I have a website, but it's under construction, so I wouldn't lead people to that. But I am pretty active on LinkedIn, and I'm also active on Twitter, so people can reach me through those channels. Yeah. And I'll be happy to chat with anyone about their immigrant experience or mental health journey. I'm not a mental health practitioner yet in Canada, but as you can see, I have a lot of thoughts about mental health and how things should be and how I can contribute to make things better. So I'm always open to meeting new people, listening to their stories. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you. So I will also link your LinkedIn and Twitter link to the show notes of the podcast when it's aired. So thank you so much. It was great to have you on Mind Your Own Revisions, and until next time.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.